Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Podcastage. Today I am back with a review and demo of the Neve Portico 5017 Preamp DI box and compressor. This thing costs $1,400. I'll throw some links in the description if you want to check it out. Full disclosure, I bought this with my own money. All of my recording settings will be listed in the doobly-doo as well as the description. And now let's talk about what comes in the box. What a shocker, you get the preamp, you get the required power cable, and a manual. Then as far as the build quality, this thing feels absolutely fantastic. It has an all-metal chassis, the dials are all nicely attached, the buttons feel pretty decent to engage and disengage, the XLR ports don't have any excessive wobble to them, and whether you care or not, this Pre is made in the USA. Now let's walk through all the features that are crammed into this preamp. On the top, you'll find nothing. On the sides, you'll find nothing. On the bottom, you find nothing but some rubber feet to keep it from sliding around. On the front, you have a 1/4-inch high-Z instrument input, an instrument pass-through, an instrument input gain dial, an activity light for the instrument input, a Phase button, and a dial to adjust the phase. This is useful if you're doing a DI and miking the same source. You have a blend dial for mixing the instrument input and the microphone input. You have a silk button. You have a compressor button and the compressor threshold dial. You have an activity light for the compressor to let you know when you're getting gain reduction. You have a gain dial, which ranges from 0 decibels to plus 66 decibels. You'll find a meter light for the preamp so you know when you're getting a signal. You have a high pass filter button, and you have a phase inversion button. Then on the back, you have the power input, you have the power button, you have a ground lift switch, you have a 48 volts phantom power switch to power a condenser microphone, you have an XLR microphone input, an XLR line output, and a 1/4-inch balanced microphone output. Then as far as the specs, the Pre has mic gain of up to 66 decibels, you get an EIN of around minus 128 dBu, a high-pass filter at 80 Hz at 12 dB per octave, a compressor ratio is set at 2:1, and if you adjust the internal jumpers, you can get an attack of 40 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, and a release of 40 milliseconds or 350 milliseconds. Then as far as the frequency response of this preamp, take my measurements with a grain of salt, but I found it to be relatively neutral. But once you engage the silk circuit, you get a little bit of a boost focused around 300 Hz, and then a minor cut around 6 kHz. First thing I want to do is see how this preamp handles an SM7B because this is such a quiet microphone. So right now the 7B is running directly into the Portico. There is no Cloudlifter and no Fethead. My gain is set at 60 decibels. I'm running plus 4 dBu line level into the Universal Audio X8, and on my meters I am peaking between minus 15 and minus 9 dB, which is exactly where I want to be when I'm recording. Now I'll shut up for a second so we can hear what kind of noise is picked up with our gain at 60 decibels. But if you're a little bit quieter and you need a little bit more gain, we have 6 more decibels. I have just engaged that, so now I am running 66 decibels of gain on the 5017. Again, I am peaking between minus 15 and minus 12 to minus 9 dB, which is a really good level for recording. But if your line input is switchable, I just changed over to minus 10 dBV line input, and I was able to decrease my gain to 54 decibels, so we have a lot more level to play with. I can boost this up to 60. We are now peaking around minus 3 dB. And if I was doing ASMR, I can boost it up to 66 decibels. So you have a bit more wiggle room if you can switch from plus 4 dBu to minus 10 dBV. Now we're just doing a quick comparison between the Portico and the 18i20 2nd Gen. I'm going to do a couple switches back and forth while I'm talking so we can hear if there is any significant change in the tone from something like the Portico to a much more entry-level interface preamp. I've level matched them as close as I can. The gain on the Portico is 60 decibels. The gain on the 18i20 is just shy of 100%. Let me go ahead and replace the microphone now and see if there is any difference in the noise floor. Now let's do a really quick spoken word comparison between a couple of higher end preamps. So I'm running the U87 through a mic splitter. That is then running into the Portico with silk circuit engaged, 36 decibels of gain, and recording 2448 on the UAX8. I am also running through the Warm Audio 73 EQ. EQ is bypassed, gain is set at 40 decibels, and then I rolled back the output. I did that to level match them as close as I possibly can in the analog realm. I will have been switching back and forth between the preamps so you can hear any kind of difference in tone. Which one do you like better? Let's do another comparison. For the second preamp comparison, all of the settings on the Portico are identical, 36 decibels, silk circuit engaged, no high pass filter, and the compressor is shut off. The second preamp is now the Universal Audio LA610 Mark II. Gain is set at plus 5 dB. The level is set at 3 to 3.5. The compressor is bypassed. No EQ is engaged. And that should be enough switching back and forth between these two preamps so you can hear if there is any kind of significant tonal difference and determine if you like the sound of one of them better than the other. Now I'm right on top of the U87 to really exaggerate the proximity effect with the preamp in neutral mode, and here is how it's sounding. Now I have engaged the 80 Hz high pass filter, 12 dB per octave. Here is how it sounds. Should clean up a bit of the mud in the lower frequencies. Again, here is how it sounds without that high pass filter engaged, and here is how it sounds with the high pass filter turned on. Now let's hear how the silk circuit impacts the tone of the recording. So right now I'm a few inches off of the 87. The preamp is in neutral mode, and this is what it's been sounding like. And now I have engaged the silk circuit. Here is how the preamp sounds running with the silk circuit engaged. Let me go ahead and shut that off again. The silk circuit is off. Here's what it sounds like. And now I have turned on the silk circuit, and here is how it sounds with that circuit engaged. Now let's hear the compressor, so we'll start by turning that on, and then I will decrease the threshold until we start to get a little bit of gain reduction. You can hear it kicking in right about here and also see the gain reduction light kicking on, but let's go ahead and decrease this all the way. This just gives you an idea of the character, the attack, the release, the coloration of this thing. This is obviously far too aggressive, but I wanted you to be able to hear how it sounds when you just squash something. But let's roll the threshold back to something much more reasonable, where it just captures a couple of the peaks and makes the sound a bit more level. Now let's do a quick music test where I'll demo a DI drum machine, DI bass, DI acoustic guitar, and a mic'd up electric so we can see how this thing performs. And also, because of that blend dial, you essentially have a very basic mixer where you can mix the DI signal and the microphone input. So if you wanted to DI an acoustic and then sing into a microphone, you'd be able to do that. And I'll give you a quick demo. If I wanna sing, I will. If I wanna mix, I will. Between the mic and DI, because I can. More guitar, less vocals. A lot more vocals, a lot less guitar. You can do what you want. There's the test. Given how relatively small this preamp is, I am incredibly impressed with how good it sounds and how many features they were able to cram into this thing. It's kinda crazy. And first up, as far as pros, has to be the amount of gain on tap. You have 66 decibels, which should be sufficient to drive pretty much any microphone that I can think of. That gain on top of that is incredibly clean and low noise. You're getting a really great sounding compressor. If you want a bit more coloration, you have that silk circuit that you can turn on or off. You have that high pass filter, the phase inversion. You have a great sounding DI, and if you watch my channel at all, you know I am a huge sucker for made in the USA stuff, so that is a pro for me. And then as far as cons, number one for me is the power jack on this thing. It is far too wobbly, especially given this price point. It does not instill confidence, and I really hope they can update the design, maybe make some changes and resolve that on future iterations, because at this price, the power jack should feel very sturdy. Currently, it does not. Secondly, I don't find the meter lights to be particularly useful. It does go red when you clip the preamp, but up until then, it is just varying shades of brightness. Maybe there are different colors, but I'm colorblind, so I can't see them, so I don't find them particularly useful. You can determine if you're clipping, but up until there, I found it kind of to be a guessing game. Now we're moving away from the more blatant cons, more into my wishes for this thing, and first up is the silk circuit. I love how that sounds, but I really wish we could get more aggressive with it, so changing from an on-off to more of a dial, where you could get really aggressive with it or just add a touch of color, would have been amazing. Building on top of that, the compressor sounds great, but it has very limited control. All you can do is adjust the threshold and determine how much compression you're getting, unless you want to take the top off and mess with some internal jumper cables to adjust the attack and release. I just think it would be even better if you had more control over the compressor. And my final complaint is very common by now. It is the lack of an output volume control. That just makes it very difficult to overdrive the preamp and get that distortion without also overdriving and distorting your A to D converters, which is something you do not want to do. So you are kind of forced to use this as a much cleaner way to drive your microphone, as opposed to using it to distort and get a bit more of that color. But now, what do I think the 5017 is offering you as a preamp over the internal pre on an interface? Yes, you're getting 66 decibels of gain. Yes, that gain is clean. But as far as the sound, you can get a very clean and neutral sound, but if you want a bit more color, you can engage that silk circuit. And as far as the comparison in sound from the preamp to the interface, the main thing that I heard was the upper frequencies just opening up, sounding much less closed off and much more lively and exciting. It was awesome sounding, and this was much more subtle, but I did also hear the bass frequencies sounding a tad bit punchier. You're also getting a really good sounding DI box, you're getting a high pass filter, phase inversion, you get a good sounding compressor, albeit very limited in the controls, and essentially you're getting a very basic mixer with the ability to mix between the DI input and the microphone. And to wrap up, would I recommend the Rupert Neve Designs Portico 5017? Kind of. First off, I think this thing sounds absolutely bonkers. It sounds phenomenal. This is one of my favorite sounding preamps that I have ever tried. It offers a ton of gain, clean gain, compression, DI box. pretty much every basic function that you might need when you're looking at a preamp. So the reason I'm saying I only kind of recommend this is, yes, $1,400 is a lot of money, so you need to know that you love this thing before buying it, but mainly because yes, it does have a ton of features, but the control over those features is very limited, so you need to love how those features are set up. You need to love the silk circuit as it is, you need to love the ratio of the compressor, and you need to be able to adjust the attack and release with some jumper cables if you want something slightly different. But if you like the sound of this thing, if the features fit your use case, and if $1,400 is within your budget, then I say go for it, because this thing, it just sounds so good, dude. Like, it sounds so good. I love how the 87 sounds through this thing. It may be my favorite preamp. I am very reluctant to say that because that is high praise, but I love how this thing sounds. That's all that I've got for you today. If you found this video fun, interesting, or helpful, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Hated it, big old thumbs down. Want more videos like this? Go ahead and subscribe. Videos like this where I buy gear to review is made possible, or are made possible, by the financial supporters of this channel. So thank you to them, huge thank you to them, and huge thank you to you for coming by and watching and listening. I really do appreciate you taking your time to do that. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Love ya. Bye-bye. Whoa. Whoa. Boop.